Our guest of honour today is a formidable presence in the world of Australian media. The son of a sawmiller who got his first media break as a 17-year-old boy with a Melbourne ad agency, he now chairs the biggest advertising company in the nation, an enterprise he grew from scratch into a $100 million powerhouse. Harold Mitchell is not only Australia's most successful and well-connected media buyer, a columnist, an author and a consummate networker, he's also a patron and a tireless promoter of the arts, a generous philanthropist and a man with enough bravado to bankroll a rugby union team in the heartland of Sherrin. Mumbrella has declared him to be the most important man in Melbourne. A big call, perhaps. The Australian's recent form guide for the top 50 people in Australian media was almost as generous. They backed him as an impressive number 4 in an impressive number 4 slot, smack bang between Rupert Murdoch and Kim Williams, although that is perhaps not the most comfortable spot to find oneself these days. There is no doubt, however, that Harold is the standout Mitchell in our media midst. Namesake Chris came in at 16 on the Oz list. Clearly the editor-in-chief was unable to fix his own form guide, while the bewhiskered Neil ranked a disappointing 32. Harold Mitchell's CV is exhausting reading. He told me to leave it alone, but I'll give you some of it. He is currently chairman of Care Australia, the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and Art Exhibitions Australia. He is Vice President of Tennis Australia and Director of the Deakin Foundation. He has also served as Chairman of the National Gallery of Australia, President of the Melbourne International Festival of Arts, President of the Museums Board of Victoria and as a board member of the Opera Australia Council. But more than any of these achievements, from the perspective of our industry at least, Harold Mitchell has been a tireless champion of the media in all its incarnations, in good times and bad. And these are tough times. Newspaper circulations are eroding, free-to-air television networks are under great pressure, and media advertising revenues have slumped. Yet Harold Mitchell remains an unshakable optimist, particularly for the huge opportunities of the digital era, and that will be the focus of his address today. Last week he wrote in BRW that his advertising industry barometer was pointing to more problems than we might have thought. But he went on to say that his company had recorded solid growth in the downturns of 2001 and 2009 by pushing against the tide. He wrote, "Most businesses respond by heading for the bunkers. They reduce staff, scale down marketing, cut budgets and consolidate the contraction. My response to the downturns was to increase staff, boost marketing and expand into new areas. By moving deliberately and decisively against the trend, the morale of our team went sky high and they had great confidence in themselves and their company. They achieved their targets and more." Harold Mitchell also swims against the tide of doom and gloom about newspapers and their prospects. He champions the point, lost on many observers, that while newspaper readerships are contracting, the audiences for that same journalism have grown strongly on newspaper-backed websites. And he's been a sharp critic of reform proposals of the Finkelstein media inquiry. There is, he says, no clear case that any additional government-inspired reforms are required for an industry whose freedoms are time-honoured by all free societies. Welcome, Harold Mitchell.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's such a worry, I might say, for someone who's read everything that you've written. Even I don't do that, Mark, so thank you so much for all of that. Can I say it's an absolute delight to be here? I think I last spoke some years ago and I told a joke, and one of our fellows over here remembered the joke, so I'd even forgotten that, so I moved on from it. The industry, the couple of things which have run through my mind, I'm going to talk about the digital money trail in a moment, and surprisingly for me I'm going to use a few slides. I never do that because what happens usually is that looks very nice, I used to eat all those ones. What really happens when you use a few slides, but it's some serious stuff. I'm going to leave a couple of major points here, and I'm going to lay out one chart that I've used to make $300 million, so you can have a look at it yourself and see how it all works, and it does. But what happens if you use a lot of slides or charts slides we used to call them. You start to look at the slides, then I start to look at the slides, and we're not looking at each other. So, but we'll have a bit of a go at it. And I've also got a lovely lady over here called Jane, wherever Jane went, is going to press the button for me. But what was running through my mind as I came here today was two incredible things that have happened in my life. Firstly, that I started in this city, and I stayed in this city, and I'll finish in this city, I can tell you that, with everything that I do. It has been an incredible, incredible city for me, as it is for so many of you that are here. Let me just go back to a couple of things. In 1901, this city of Melbourne had the highest per capita income in the world. It was the richest place to be. We had more inventions per head, patents per head than anywhere else in the world. We'd started the libraries, the universities, the art galleries. We bought 1/3 of all the great pictures that there were available, the great masters over the next 7 years. 1/3 of all the great masters' artworks in the world. It was an incredible place to be because we'd had 50 years of the gold that had run before it. Let's go on 110 years of what's happened. We're now digging it up and selling it again like you wouldn't believe, as you know. We have the 7th highest per capita GDP in the world. We're the 20th biggest economy in the world, and yet we're less than 1% of the world's population. We are in an incredible position all over again. And my life has been through from when I arrived here in 1959 in this city. And now, if you're in the media business, you move to Sydney, you do what you do, and some of our others have moved elsewhere overseas. I stayed here because it is a great place to be. And to see it come back to the great strength that it is just so incredible. But a couple of things run through my mind about all of that. We're back where we are, but you all know, because you talk about it, what's going wrong. I was just talking with my good friend Lewis Martin from the Seven Network. Their shares went down. They shouldn't have gone down. We know that the longer term is good for everything that's going to be. But it's because we're nervous. We're nervous about a couple of things because something is going on out there. I go to London every 3 or 4 weeks because of a board I sit on there, and it's not as if I don't trust the London folk on the board, I can tell you. I just want to be there just to make sure it's all okay. So I feel a bit like Humphrey Bogart. I don't take any clothes there. I leave my clothes in the hotel and they tuck them away and they do that. So a couple of visits ago I took Paul Keating's book of speeches and in coming back I couldn't fit the book in. So I tore out 3 pages. I didn't tell Paul that, but what are you doing, comrade? What about the rest? But the point was there were 2 key things that he said, just back to where we are right now. One was a speech he gave in 1998 about the importance of Asia. Now remember, in 97 it had absolutely collapsed. All of Asia, remember the Hong Kong stock market one day went down 18%. It just bang, it just went like that. And so in 98, Keating said that we must embrace Asia at our peril. And how true is that? Because the 19th century belonged to Europe as it went around the world and everything, and we all grew out of that. The 20th century belonged to the United States of America. 5% of the world's population finished with 25% of the world's wealth. All of that is changing. The 21st century, and we're such a major part of it, belongs to Asia. By halfway through the century, 2050, this part of the world will represent 50% of the world's economy, and that hasn't happened for 400 years, and we're right in the middle of it. Keating said that then, but the second part was just so important to today as I was coming here to think about it, which is about leadership. And he said there's only 2 elements of leadership. Now, I've led many things. When you heard I'm chairman, I chair all of those boards, by the way, because that way you can shorten the meetings. You can even decide whether you're going to have one. Leadership, what was it? He said 2 things, and it's as good as something as I found for a long time, I'd have to say. He said there are 2 things about leadership. Imagination, that is, we can do it. We made ourselves number 1 in 1901 and everything we did. I decided to make ours the biggest advertising company in Australia. We did it. A year ago, we were measured out of the 512 companies that do what we do around the world, number 1. You don't do that unless you imagine you can. That is the first point of leadership. A great lot of people around us to do it, there's no doubt about that. But the second thing is courage. It's not easy. It's not easy being a leader. If you have to compromise to get there, you didn't have the courage to be there, and you shouldn't be, and that's a great problem of it all. And so you put that measure against everything that's there. And leadership we need to lead out for again, and that's just a major thing. The second thing is George, I'm going to have a go at the name, I always get it wrong, Megalojanis. Did I get it right? Megalojanis, who's a great writer. And he took half a year off to write a book, and his book has just come out, and it's very good. And it says that there's something about Australians which is so true when you think of it. We handle adversity so well. It's just that we've been through the memories of Gallipoli again. Now, Gallipoli was a disaster. It was a great failure. but the Australians were brave beyond belief. And the adversity and everything, all of these years later, we still remember all of that was. If there's anyone in trouble, floods, fires, family down the street, if there's a problem, Australians are brilliant. We handle adversity so well. But on the other side of it, we have trouble with success. We are unbelievably successful right now. Are we grasping it? Are we grabbing it? Are we going on from there? So those were two themes that were running through my mind that I thought I'd just start with that as I talk a little bit about the business that we're in so importantly. And I want to leave it with you, that this is an incredible city. This is a great place that we can lead from in every way like that. And let's just grab it and do it every way, because we know that every time there's a little tremor out there of confidence, it affects everything that's in this business here. The business is here, in my particular case, because it's the media and everything with it, it's driven by advertising. We got into the digital business, which I'm going to talk about, in 2000, because we knew that that would drive it. It would drive so much into the future, because advertising was important. Put advertising in some context. We're less than 1% of the world's population, but we have 5% of the world's advertising market. We have the highest per capita advertising spend in the world. We have an advertising industry here, which is bigger than the advertising industry of France. If you're in the ad business or in the media business here, you're as good and probably better than anyone in the world. I grew up around people like the members of this club here, in that I started as an office boy at an advertising agency just up near Russell Street, where they used to have police rounds. I don't know, wouldn't be any police rounds type people here anymore? No, there's a nodding over there. My God, how old can you be? And what colourful people the folk in this room have come from, and I probably still are. I remember people like names like Harry the Horse, Fred the Needle, they were all there. I learned to drink, actually, people like that. I gave it up after a while. And Big Jack Darmody, who was just incredible. And there was one other one which I wrote it down before, but I lost it. It was someone who had a second job as a pickpocket, and they picked him up on all of that. So I'm going to talk about the digital money trail, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. There's a real point in it, because it's an absolute key as to what's going on out there. That the advertising industry is at the centre of so much that happens in our economy, and we can read so much of it, and that's been such an important thing. Since 2001, I've been saying about the digital world, and the world that we're in is hang on for the ride, because I knew that this business was going to change in such a way. We started an internet business 1 year after Google was around, and when Rupert had still said it wouldn't work, to his credit, he changed his mind in 2003, as you know, and moved it on from there. But I said that this would be one of the major changes. I didn't know that what, in fact, we just lived through and are still living through is the greatest change in advertising history. Sounds grand to say that, but that's in fact what's happened. Probably this is as big a moment as the beginning of the printing press, because the printing press meant that now we could talk to more people than just one at a time, and that was such a big thing. I grew up in the world of mass media, mass markets, mass products. It was all about that. I could tell you that 50% of the advertising was wasted, but the other 50% that was important. No longer that is the case. From 2000, it was quite clear that the world was becoming the world of the individual, and it was everything that had been invented out of the digital world that was going to deliver those people in such a way. So today I'm here to say is that change has been underway. We started that business, as I said, in 2000. It made a fortune for me and my family, and I'm grateful for all of that happened, but mostly the fact that we stayed here and we shared that with so many different people. But there's still tumultuous changes ahead, because that happens with change, and it's so hard to see it in advance. Let's have a look at a couple of things, though, about the advertising industry. Joan, you have a bit of a go at this, or have I got it? There we go. Oh, I knew this wouldn't work too well, but I just want to show you something. There we go. I think I've got it right. There we go. Yeah, I borrowed this off my grandson, by the way. I've got to give it back. So what we're looking at here is just what's happened over a period of time of advertising spend from about the early 80s all the way through to right now. Don't worry too much about the facts of what it is, but that's the way advertising has grown over a period of time. And we put a linear line right through it. Let's pick out a couple of points. The recession that we had to have that Keating talked about here in the early 90s, you could see that we went below the line. It lasted for about 4 years. At the time, and it came back to about the line around the time of 9/11, and then collapsed again for a couple of years again. You see about 2 years, so 4 years down there, 2 years down there. At that point there, 2007, I said, this can't continue. You just look at it and you know that the economy is running ahead of itself. So what do? We sold our private interest into a public company. We cleaned up all the debt, and we said it's going to hit a wall. And in fact, 18 months later it happened. I didn't know about the American situation, they didn't know about the American situation, but we did very well by doing that. And so it continued on. When Kevin Rudd was saying this will be the greatest downturn since the 1930s, we were in the middle of a depression, I publicly said it won't happen. It can't last any more than a couple of years. That one was very shallow in 4 years. This one was only 2 years wrong with it, and I said 2 years. And within 2 years, it was back on to growth again. A year or so ago, we said we're running ahead of it again, and at some point we're going to stumble a bit. And you heard the introductory remarks that I said that we're going to have a little moment ahead where it will be a problem. And so we're ready for that. We shouldn't be concerned if we know that this is what's happening over a period of time. The point out of it all is quite simple. From my point of view, it took me a while to work it out, about 30 years, that in fact advertising is a great way of being a barometer of what's happening in the economy. It's simply because this. Advertising people can go back after lunch today and simply turn off the advertising tap tomorrow morning. You can't do that with the staff, with anything else that's a major overhead or cost. Equally, you can turn it up again. Actually, what's happening right now is that it is changing dramatically and quickly because the confidence is gone. And it is a dilemma. It's an absolute dilemma, which is back to my early point about leadership. We could get all of this back again tomorrow, but we know from the forward position of what's happening in advertising, we've been able to read it, always have. If it's not looking too good, you won't find any public comments from me, and that's always a bit of a sign. If it's okay, we'll tell everybody about it, because if I publicly say it's not looking good, it probably won't be. And so it's not as I'm all powerful about things, but usually we've been able to pick it. So what we're saying out of that is Australia's an incredible position. We are amazingly well off in everything that we do. I'm involved in a company as the second biggest shareholder worldwide of one of the very big ad firms that we deal in 62 countries, and I can tell you, here we are okay. The only people that don't know about it are ourselves. So the point is, we'll have ups and downs. There will be moments. Channel 7 got knocked around for a couple of days. I know underneath it, they are unbelievably strong. The money is rolling in, their ratings are okay, time is all right. But it's a question of confidence in every way. For some reason, we just feel just on the edge of it. David Gingell was telling me that when the ANZ Bank put their rates up just a whisker, you might remember 0.04%, something very, very tiny, Women's Weekly sales, which they can now measure daily, the next day went down 15%. Now that's incredible. People can afford a Women's Weekly. Of course they want it, they will get it. The next day they bought it. But suddenly they just felt they were real worried about it. It's the job of all of us, the people in this room here, as much as anyone else, to realise that we're in a very good place. Let's go to slide 2 there, Jane. Where are you? Yeah. Very good, all right. We're entering a period of incredible media fragmentation. That's the next biggest thing that's underway. As this chart shows, digital technologies are taking over the media in traditional and new. And as you heard from the introductory remarks there, we shouldn't be concerned about any part of that. The key point out of all of this is quite simple up in the right-hand corner, which I got there. 85% of all media by 2020. People say this to me will be digital. People say this to me, what about newspapers? We've known for a long time. That part of it's all over. But you shouldn't worry about that, because the content is the king and it's the most important part of all. But the delivery of it will be just so different. 85% of all media by 2020, just everywhere, will be digital. 66 right now, as you know, and as you heard before, The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald's the same with the news titles. More people are now reading it online, and in fact, the biggest delivery system by 2015. The senior people at Telstra was telling me this morning will be in tablet form. And so that's the new word, the world that is changing with that. But right now, digital technology is giving a new lease of life to media for all over. The free-to-air television channels, suddenly they're okay again because they've got those 3 extra channels and people are prepared to go there and do it. Outdoor video technology is coming and you see all of that, just what it can do in every way. I drove out to the airport the other day, and one of the usual big still signs that was there that we usually buy, suddenly it moved. I thought, what is going on? And it put up an Anzac Day message because it could. Cinema, suddenly that's changing dramatically everywhere. And television, the new digital channels, as I mentioned. Newspaper readership is all about online, so journalists now understand that you don't go and file a story and go back and type it out and do all the things you have to do. If you've got a story now, you pick up the phone, and it ought to be out there in about 2 minutes. I mean, we make announcements at our place and someone walks in about 2 seconds later and says, look at this. It all comes in because that's the world that it is. Just get used to it. That someone said to me the other day that this 24-hour news cycle is a hard thing to deal with. Well, if it's a hard thing to deal with, give up, because it's there, and that's just the way it is. Slide 3. What do I got? I've never done these slides quite so much before. Oh, my bloke, he did this because he wanted me to. It's so scary. But let me tell you, it's about where Australia is in the world, and it's what the broadband's all about. Now, it's not good that we get stuck into the broadband and say that we shouldn't have it or it's too costly or something like that. Stand back from it all. What's the broadband all about? Because you look at the top of that slide there, which I'll just show you just there, is the UK, where there is such a great way of pushing out all sorts of information in every way. And so what that says is that 36% now of all advertising is online there. But look at where Australia is, 22%. What about the broadband? We were 17th in the world with broadband speed. I mean, New Zealand was ahead of us, imagine. And we're dealing in Asia where the number one are places like Korea, South Korea. Our kids would never get there unless we did this thing with the broadband, such a critical thing to do. We know that this is going to move on dramatically. And if you don't get this digital thing, just get out of the business, because that's the biggest thing that's going to happen in every way from there. It's relentless, the way it's going to continue to grow and to change from here on. And that's the biggest thing that's going to happen from there. Share of advertising expenditure, thanks Jane, which is... There you go. What's going to happen from here? I've been looking at this thing for a long time. I mean, you'd have to say, I think people call it trend analysis. That's pretty clear, isn't it, where that one's going? And these people see how the free-to-air kick themselves up again. How good is this? But we started an online business there when people thought we were crazy. But look at that line there. You don't get too many like that, or too many wobbly hands, I won't say. But that's just what it is. Where does it go from there? Well, that's pretty simple, isn't it? Let's have a go, Jane. Thanks, Jane. And that's what's going to happen. That by 2015, there we go. That's what happened to digital. It'll simply take it over from there. And if you're not in the digital business, you weren't in the digital business, you missed out of it from every way from there. And that's just a major thing. Clearly, in the digital world, and we had a company called Image, which has done so well over a period of time. And when I said the chief executive in 2004, this thing called search, he said it'll never work. I can tell you the biggest thing that's happened, thanks Jane, is what's happened. Here, Google. Now, Google's now got a turnover of $1 billion. It's the biggest media company in Australia in every way like that. It's all about search, and that's the biggest thing that's happened in such a strange and incredible way. Not really. People want to know about things, and that's what they do, and that's what's going to change dramatically over a long period of time. It gives us all sorts of new opportunities, though, that you hear these words, you say, are we putting this in the middle of our life? Things like social media, online video, mobile, they're all the words that are going to be out there before. We were talking before about, I started in this business when I learned how to be a typographer, that is to work up sizes of type. It was, and it's just changed so dramatically in such a short space of time. I'm only interested in two words, which is owning tomorrow. That's what's coming. I love history, all the things. I love the old art, old books, all of those sort of things. But if you're in business, the biggest thing is what's happening next. And that's the biggest part of it all. What's happening next is video. It's going to continue to become so much more important. If you're in the hard news business, take a camera with you. Plug it in, send it back straight away. This right now, up there, is going out to the world, which is a small world, I won't say, because it can. And that's what will happen before I was talking to our host about how, and he was telling me how they're going to cover the budget lock-up next week and everything like that. And you just do it so easily from just a laptop or a mobile phone, but it's out there immediately. So everything to do with video, instant. When I lost the 70 kilos, somebody would well know that hadn't lost all the weight, I wouldn't be here today because I couldn't have got up the stairs. But I did, and I've got a guy called Marty, the trainer, every Sunday morning. Marty's a good guy. He ran the Commonwealth Games 400 metres, he's all fine, and he doesn't read too many newspapers, but he knows everything that's happening. I said, Marty, where do you get all this stuff, how you all know everything? He says, I get off the television. I don't know, I don't read newspapers. I'll tell you, it's interesting. What do you mean? He said, you know those scrawly things under the bottom of it in the breakfast program? It's all there. I suppose it probably is, you know. How many words you need to say war with Iran? And so he gets it all from there. And that's the new world that's out there in every way that is. Social media. Now, you know the problems that one or two people get into with social media. It was mentioned I'm involved with a rugby club. Well, some crazy about 3 weeks ago thought he'd share the world on social media about what he thought about everybody in the world. Nowhere to hide anymore. Then there's mobile. You know, there's over 22 million, I can't quite get the number, but 22 or 25 million mobile phones, which are just going to be everything everywhere. And a slide right at the end just shows how it's all taken off from there. That's the biggest thing in every way that you could ever see. And finally, as you can see from second last, I think, thanks Jane, from there, just what's happening with untappable potential in everywhere that this is going to go. So if you're getting the message that this is an important part of it, it is. It does mean some things along the way. The old-fashioned ad agency that I grew up in, it went through a change, a big change. People like us, because of the history of what we did. I started a media buying business, so-called, in 1976, when ad agencies controlled everything from this city. There were hardly any elsewhere around the world. One that started in France a couple of years earlier. There was one in England, Chris Ingram, and there was a guy in New York who went broke. And so we started this with a fellow in Sydney, Dennis Merchant, before almost anyone else had ever done anything like it. And so we were able to do it. And so we started a digital business here, which became a big one. What the point of it is that people here can go out and do almost anything because of where we are and take it all the way around the world. And so the tiny segments of what you see from here are all the big ones that are going to grow from there. Finally, let's look at something extraordinary about what's happened over a period of time, because we were talking about shares and what from there. This is a great story. I had a guy pull this one out yesterday afternoon. If you just look at happened because media is linked to public companies, and you just look at along the bottom, those that you can read them, I'll just read them out. News, Time Warner, Walt Disney, Comcast, New York Times, CBS and Yahoo. Those that really got into the digital business, look at what happened to the share price. And as we well know, the two that are there are Google and Apple. What I can say is this, though, that's a story that's unfolding quicker than you ever thought before. Clearly, we're right now riding a tidal wave of change like you've never seen. Still surging forward, all those sort of things. I said I'm only interested in what's going to happen from here. My son, who I've done many things with over a long period of time, I said, I've been at the edge of a lot of things over what we've done. I think maybe I can pick a couple others, I'm not so sure. But the really big thing for everyone in this room is what's going to happen next. Where is it? We think we've got a couple of really big ideas about it as to what it might be, but that's the biggest thing that's going to happen from here on. In summary, we're in an incredible place in this city, in this country. We don't quite get it, and we should. I would hate to think that the words are revisited of Lee Kuan Yew, which I still ring in my mind about becoming, he meant it, and it would be so bad if it didn't, being the white trash of Asia. It would be a terrible thing to be, because we're so powerful, we're so good. I know, dealing around the world, Australians are as good as anybody at anything. Our company is as good as anyone in the world. That's not because of me, it's because we've got great Australians doing it. This is the time when we have to grab it. We worry about leadership, we worry about government. Don't. Because people say to me, why aren't they doing something about it? There is no they, it's us, it's everyone like this. We need to return to a time where leaders, in 1901, when we got to the point that I was talking about how strong we were, in 1901, you couldn't blame the federal government for getting us there, we didn't have one. It was in fact in 1901, in March, I think it was that year, that we had the first federal government. It was the people. It was the people that did it. It was the David Symes of the world, everyone who grew out of that. And it's time to get back to something like that again, that the leadership will come from all of the people that are out there. You can't do it with our political leaders, it's too hard to do. We put them in for just 3 years. They've had to say things to get there, compromise, very difficult, hard from there on. A great place to be if we grab it. I see the chairman. You ready to go? Ready to go home? A couple of questions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.